I think we're good.
I think we're
Welcome.
good. Welcome. It's Monday, Deal Doctor live stream time, and here I am with Eric Graham. We're going to talk today about a couple of scenarios that agents are faced with where they have to make a decision about what agency position they're going to take or what agency position they're going to be allowed to take. And some of the various positions might be buyer's agent, seller's agent, transaction coordinator, and of course, the beloved dual agency situation. And we're going to talk about all of those and how we make the decision when we are faced with that. So we're going to start with an easy one, okay? And this is Eric's good friend Charlie. Charlie is Eric's children's godfather. Eric stood up for him as his best man at his wedding. They go fishing every third Tuesday, and they've been friends for 25, 30 years. Charlie calls Eric and says, "Hey, Eric, would you do me a favor? I want to list my house with you. I'm willing to pay you a hefty commission, and I don't want to discount it at all. I want you to list my house. Would you be willing to do that?" And Eric, what's your answer for Charlie so far?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So along comes a buyer. Eric does an open house, and along comes a buyer, stumbles over the threshold. And Eric says hello and all of that stuff. And I'm working for the seller, blah, blah, blah. And the buyer says, "I'd love to buy this house." And Eric says, "Great, I can help you. So you understand I'm working for the buyer. Well, I want you to work for me too. I want you to have me as your client as well." And now you're faced with dual agency.
Yeah, well, first of all, obviously, I would know why they would want to work with me, right? As a buyer agent. I mean, who wouldn't?
Well, of course, and why not? Yes.
But unfortunately, in these types of situations, when we have a client that we are representing, we really need to stick with, in this case, a seller's agent or the listing side. I've known Charlie for 25, 30 years. The idea that all of a sudden this buyer comes in and says, "Hey, look, I want you to represent me as well." Well, we just can't do it. It's not plausible. We can't have two separate clients and representing them both. In this case, I'm already have the seller side, and I need to stick with Charlie and move forward. Now, I could tell this person that, "Hey, look, I do represent the seller, but I can still help you write up the offer. I can still explain what your deadlines are and what needs to be done, because ultimately that helps my seller get to the end line." But in this case, I would have to just explain that I cannot represent them, and I have to stick with the listing side of this, but I'd be happy to write it up on their
All
behalf.
right, well, I'm gonna twist it up just a little bit here. Let's say that buyer was actually somebody you had under contract who happens to be your brother-in-law, okay? And you've known your brother-in-law for quite a while. And so now you have two people with whom you have ongoing personal relationships and or business relationships. And now you are faced with the very real situation of having two people, one a seller under contract and a buyer under contract. And now you decide, well, I think I'm going to go into dual agency.
Okay, now this is a perfect scenario. I like it.
Oh, it's going to be not so perfect in a minute.
I'm sure it might not be.
Okay, but it sounds like a perfect scenario, right?
It sounds like a great scenario. So I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here. That one, I'm the listing agent. I've sat down and I already have a listing. I ensured that I explained that there's a possibility that dual agency could come up when I sat down and did my listing. Hopefully the agent did, or I did. And if you don't do that, please do that in the future, anytime you have a listing. My buyer client that I have enrolled, I would have also had that conversation about the potential for future dual agencies. And every time you do represent a buyer, if you don't do this as part of your practice, you should include and let them know what dual agency means in case you ever run into this. Now I have both parties. Now I'd have to go to my client who I'm selling their home, I'm the listing agent, and say, "Chuck, what do you think about me going into dual agency? Chuck, how do you feel about me not being able to negotiate on your behalf? How do you feel about me not being able to really guide you? If you'd like to, then I can go in the dual agency, but I won't be able to negotiate on your behalf or guide you. Does that sound like a great?
I'm paying you 30 grand in commission and you can't give me any guidance? Is that what you're
That's
saying?
correct. That's what dual
No.
agency is. But
No,
I
I'm
hope that
fine
you
with
will
that.
agree, because I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
That's step one. Now time out. I still have the other side here. Now I got to go to the buyer and say, hey, look, my brother-in-law, hey, I got this great deal for you. We go the dual agency. How about I no longer am able to guide you and give you professional advice against the other side? How would you like that? Well, no, I don't like it. I want you to represent me. I want you to tell me what I need to do. Well, I can't, but if you sign here as a dual agent, we can make sure that I can't really guide you in anything. How's that sound?
Oh,
Well,
I love the sound of that. I really do.
no one's going to like it.
But the point is that you raise, Eric, is the correct one. There are two steps that have to take place. First of all, you have to explain your reduced capacity in terms of agency to both parties, and then get their permission before you can move forward, right? If they
Correct.
should happen to agree, and I encourage agents, and as I did this morning with one of our agents, to send an email to both parties saying, I've explained that I'll be working in a reduced capacity with you as your agent on this transaction, as a dual agent. Please respond to this in an email that's okay with you, and I'll prepare the documents and send them to you to go into dual agency. And what are the additional documents that are required, Eric, to go into dual agency?
Yeah. So now if they both agree, now we need to send out a new agency disclosure where the box is checked dual agent. That's a disclosure law. That's required. The second form is now a new dual agency agreement. The agreement hires you. Now remember that the disclosure only discloses that if you get hired, how you're going to act. So the agency disclosure form where the box is checked dual agent only explains to them that, hey, and even on the bottom, it says this is not a contract. It just explains that if you are hired, this is how you'll start acting. Then the official hiring is the dual agency agreement where you send it out, they both sign it. Now you're hired as a dual agent. So let's recap. So I'm going to have a listing agency disclosure, a listing contract, because I'm helping Chuck. My future brother-in-law, I'm going to have a buyer's agency disclosure as a buyer's agent. I'm going to have a buyer's agency agreement that hires me. Now I'm going to have a third set of documents, the dual agency disclosure, and then the dual agency agreement that hires me. And they're all going to go in dot loop.
And that is the process. That is the step. Now, in practice, let's pretend we're going down this road with Charlie and your brother-in-law, or as you call him, Chuck. He doesn't let me call him Chuck, by the way. But anyway,
I call him other things, but that's
yeah, we don't need to talk about that. Anyway, so we're going down the road. How do you actually, in practice, work with these two people for whom you have no real agency relationship? What do you recommend?
Well, if you have a true relationship with both parties, it's very hard to distinguish who you're going to go with. I guess it would, if it were me, if Charlie had come to me first and said, hey, I want you to help me list my home, I would stick with the person. I would stick with the person that my first loyalties that I fell into with. I mean, if it had been my let's say a brother-in-law, if he had said, hey, I want you to help me be a buyer, and all of a sudden this house came up, maybe there's a possibility where I stick with the buyer. And it's very complicated. I guess for me, it really depends on who I'm meeting first and who I have my first loyalties
let me
with.
clarify.
Who hires me first is who I'd stick with.
If we're going down the road of dual agency, that both parties understand I'm working in a reduced capacity. Both parties have agreed that that's okay in writing, signed all the documents. How do we work in practice?
Okay. So,
to make sure that we are protecting ourselves from being accused of favoring one party over the other.
yeah, so I'm sorry, I misunderstood the first time, Don. So thank you for clarifying. So once you do have that dual agency and you have conflicts here, because clearly, and let's say the scenario that we're giving, I know both parties very, very well. And the only way to truly be a dual agent is to ensure that every single conversation or correspondence that you perform is done with both parties. As a dual agent, you will no longer ever have a one-on-one conversation. The recommendation is it will always be a three-party conversation between buyer, seller, and agent. So that means phone calls. All phone calls will be three-way.
Mhm.
If someone calls you out of the blue, you have to say, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. You actually need to let me get the other party on the line, because all three
Yep.
people will need to be in a conversation. If you get an
And
email, a
email,
single email would have to say, I'm sorry, I can't respond to this. I need to forward this to the other party. So everyone is on the same board so that we can follow this paper trail that someone tried to entice you into communicating them one-on-one. And by forwarding that to the other party and letting everyone know that something came through is going to cover you. Any email correspondence, anything that's shared through Dotloop, which be shared to both parties, nothing is hidden anymore. Everything is in the open, and you no longer have autonomy over anything. You will be clearly a middle person between buyer and seller, and it will be a triangle. That's
so
it.
if I'm understanding this correctly, and tell me if I'm not, but when we go into dual agency, we have to exercise full transparency with both parties. We have to have them involved in conference calls together, or at least have recaps shared with the other party. We can't have private conversations that would possibly provide an advantage to one party over the other. Is that correct?
Yeah, and as soon as you do that and you are caught, it's now you're a non-disclosed dual agency. You can lose your commissions if one party sues. You could even be brought in front of licensing. You could have fines. You could have license suspensions, revocation of your license. It gets very serious dealing with dual agency if you don't take extreme care and follow a process that you can document and prove what you've said to both parties at the same time.
So I'm going to go back to that for sale by owner for a moment. And let's say that you have knocked on this for sale by owner's door. For sale by owner doesn't want to list with you, doesn't want to create any sort of agency representation with you.
Perfect.
With you. And you happen to have a buyer you met like last Tuesday who doesn't want to sign a buyer's agency contract with you, just wants you to show some houses. Now, it just so happens that this for sale by owner matches up exactly to what the buyer is looking for. And so you say to both of them, hey, I got this great property that I think will work. What is the other option besides being a dual agent, a buyer's agent, a seller's agent? What's the other?
Yeah, you could simply be a transaction coordinator. And a
Ooh, what's that?
transaction coordinator basically brings multiple parties together, and you have no fiduciary responsibility to either party. But what you do is bring knowledge, and you bring the ability to be able to educate the parties and get to the close. But you don't owe them any fiduciary responsibility, which is a great thing. There's a lot of states that work just as transaction coordinators because they don't want liability.
I'm going to challenge you on this one. So again, going back to the question, if you have any sort of relationship with either of those people, and you're going to go into call yourself a transaction coordinator, what's the danger in that?
Well, the danger is if, let's say, my brother's involved, or a family member, or someone that, yeah, I can see right now. The danger is a Don Phelan who's in a black robes sits in the judicial court systems looking down at me saying, Mr. Graham, are you for sure? Are you for real that you're a transaction coordinator, even though you've known this person for 30 years, or you've helped them sell other residential properties? you've helped lease on their behalf. You've had a business relationship with them for 5-10 years. Now you mean to tell me that you're a transaction coordinator between this past relationship that you've had and this other person? Explain that to me.
Yeah.
So the danger is
Therein
having a
lies the problem.
relationship
Yeah.
with someone in the past.
So, yeah, therein lies.
It's a conflict of interest is what they would call it.
Oh, absolutely. And so again, we get into, but let's pretend that we really don't have any relationship with either party, and we decide to be a transaction coordinator. Now, there's this preconception out there that if you're a transaction coordinator, you have to take less money. And you have to, transaction coordinator, well, I'll be a transaction coordinator. How much will you charge for that? Well, let's say $2,000. That's kind of the perception out there. But is that reality?
No, it's actually more work because
Yeah.
you're still doing both sides and you're still providing counseling. You still have timelines that you're going to be guiding people with. You're really doing both sides of a transaction, and why agents would feel that the value of a transaction coordinator is any less than either being on one side or being both, or just being a listing agent and getting the buyer and helping both parties. It's still a lot of work, and I wouldn't, to me, my opinion is I wouldn't cut myself short on accepting
So you're saying that as a
minimal
transaction
payment.
coordinator, I could actually charge someone 5 or 6 or 7%, not just some sort of nominal fee. Is that what I'm?
Yeah, as an agent, you could charge what you felt that your services were worth.
Yeah. And anytime we get into the transaction coordinator position, the same rules apply that apply to dual agency, which is full transparency. Conversations with merge calls so that everybody understands what's being agreed to, and then follow up with an email to say, this is the conversation. Do you all agree that this is what we agreed to? And then moving forward. So those are,
Yeah, and here's the other thing about transaction coordination is that you don't have anyone, you don't have other agents helping you wrangle the goats. Because it is a goat rodeo all of a sudden. You have a buyer and seller who think they know what they're doing, and they ultimately screw things up, or they don't respond in a timely fashion. It's very frustrating dealing with the public who thinks they know what they're doing, and then they just muddy the waters. It makes it a very challenging process for an agent to follow through, and not just one side, but now you have both sides.
so I'm
And
gonna
I'm
go back to
sorry,
that FISBO again.
it's a lot. I want money to have to deal with two people who don't know what they're doing.
Again, let's go back to that FISBO. But this time you have a buyer's agent, agency relationship. You've been working with a buyer for 6 months, trying to find him a house. And what's your best position to be in with a for sale by owner that you just happen to drive by, don't know him from anyone?
Yeah, you stay in the buyer's position. One, you have loyalty, you have obedience to your client already. You don't just drop your client for the sake of the mighty dollar. You have a fiduciary responsibility to maintain as a buyer's agent, in my opinion. Now, working on behalf of your buyer, you go to the FISBO and say, hey, look, I'm Eric Graham from 5-Star Real Estate. I have a client who I think might really like your home. Would you be willing to pay me a commission if I bring you a buyer? And you negotiate out a commission on a compensation agreement form with that FISBO. And if they're willing to sign it, then great, you bring your client.
And as far as the broker administration fee, who gets to pay that on either on any double dip with an unrepresented buyer, whether it's a transaction coordinator or dual agent, whatever?
Yeah, so in this case, if I'm representing the buyer and I go to a FISBO, the FISBO is unrepresented by a brokerage, but it's not, I mean, even though they're unrepresented, 5-Star still charges a $345 admin fee for that side, because we're still responsible for ensuring their side of the transaction to the close. Now, in the compensation agreement, we would state that hey, here's our commission that we're asking plus a $345 admin fee. Now, some agents, not to muddy the waters, will just say, hey, I'm gonna pay that $345 on your behalf. to the FSBO. That is an option, but you just need to make sure that you record that somewhere in your commission compensation agreement, that agent to pay the 345, and that you turn those instructions in to title
But,
as well as to 5-star
but
once you
Eric,
get an executed purchase agreement.
I thought that the broker admin fee had to do with representation.
No, it doesn't have anything to do with representation. It
No, it
has to deal
doesn't.
with the transactional side and setting
Yeah.
up that for tracking purposes, recording purposes, employees overseeing that loop. There's a lot that goes into monitoring a transactional side from start to finish. And the biggest thing that agents can do to help us is that once they get a fully executed purchase agreement, whether they're a buyer or on the listing side, is to put all your documents into Dotloop and please submit it for review as soon as possible. We're seeing agents that are submitting these loops after the fact, after it closes. And there might come a time where maybe they're not going to be compensated a commission after the fact. But I mean, agents need to be very careful that you need to submit this as soon as possible.
And the admins know is we can't go back after the fact and get the documents that are required by law. We can't go back and say, well, where's the seller's disclosure statement after the deal's closed? Or get other documents, lead-based paint and so on. So it creates an issue where if this was ever in front of a judge, just this person, all of a sudden now they go, well, where's your seller's disclosure form? Or where's your disclosure regarding agency relationship? Or where's your compensation agreement? And you go, I got nothing. You're right, you got nothing. Guess who's going to win in that situation? You got nothing. So last thing, the best place to be, we're going to go back to Charlie, your best buddy. What's the best place to be and remain if you have Charlie's house listed?
Stick with the seller. You already have that relationship. If someone comes to you, say, hey, look, I'm more than willing to help you write this up.
Yeah.
I'm more than willing to help walk you through and explain what each line item means during the process. There's nothing that says that you can't let them know what things mean, because ultimately it helps your seller.
Yeah.
You just don't want to give them advice that says, hey, Charlie's willing to take $10,000 less than the list price. Now, I might do that just to be a jerk to Charlie.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. That would be that. I can't do that.
All right. Well, I think hopefully we will have explained it a little bit to some agents who are still a little bit unclear. But we do have some documents coming out in the near future that will help agents understand the processes for buyer's agency, transaction coordinator, dual agency, and working with FSBO. So hopefully that will be out shortly to everyone. If you have any questions, please put them in the thread here. We'll answer them throughout the day as soon as you can, as soon as we're able to respond to you. So any final thoughts, Eric?
No, thank you, Mr. Don Phelan, the one and only.
No. Thank you all. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week. Bye now.
Take care.